discovery of Neptune in 1846, the most closely interrelated planet to the 12th was Jupiter, which ruled both Sagittarius and Pisces. In the sign of Sagittarius, Jupiter expresses the side of its personality dedicated to the search for meaning and is driven to discover the big picture on the level of mind. In Pisces, we get a more watery and emotional face of Jupiter, dedicated to compassion and service and healing. The modern ruler of a planet always overlays the ancient ruler, never replaces it. But since we've had over 150 years to observe Neptune, and the world has changed enormously over that time, there's no question, to me at least, that the modern assignment of Neptune to both Pisces and the 12th house could not be more appropriate. As the last house that corresponds to the last sign of the zodiac, the 12th is by far the most complex because it deals with the unknown and the unseen and some of the more eccentric aspects of the human psyche. Consider that while the 12th is the end of the zodiac, it isn't associated with death. Death belongs to the 8th. So while the 12th is the last, it isn't the end. And that's because the horoscope is a wheel, not a straight line. And evolution is perpetual. But we do find something totally unique to the 12th, and that is a yearning for disintegration. There's an integration of the personality through the first 11 houses, a building and constructing of the individual. In the 12th, there's a yearning to escape that creation, to go back to a time when you were not yet built, not yet born. In psychological terms, the act of the small separate ego disappearing into an ocean of energy greater than the self is called dissolution. How you tend to undertake the journey of dissolution is described by the sign on the cusp and the planets within. But since this is the natural house of Pisces, the double fish, we're going to find dualities and paradoxes. So along with a yearning to dissolve is the fear of losing yourself and never coming back. An excellent example of this is yearning to merge with another by falling in love, and yet being afraid of giving up the freedom and control you have as a single person. The reason the 12th has been considered malefic over the centuries is because people can so badly mismanage the ego's dissolution. When you find your dissolution in the universal consciousness of the Holy Spirit, it's usually positive. When you find yourself dissolving into a cloud of crack or meth, that's a problem. Whenever you lose yourself, you either come back renewed and carrying more wisdom, or you come back weaker and more broken. Any place where you might, in isolation, undo yourself and collapse, and then pull yourself back together again, is found in the 12th. Here are monasteries and hospitals, convents and jails, spiritual retreats, and insane asylums. These 12th house institutions have something in common. For one, they take you out of public life into a private world. And for two, they revive you with Neptune's healing waters. The amount of isolation and solitude you need are described by the conditions of the 12th house in the chart. Some people need a lot of opportunities to undo themselves and pull themselves back together again in privacy. People with a heavy 12th house will often dream of a monastic life, and they'll create time for solitude and healing no matter what kind of life they're living. And this is so that redemption can occur. And what I mean by redemption in this case is sloughing off of energies, being scrubbed clean, becoming whole again. There's another side to this dynamic, of course. People with 12th house planets say they feel isolated. How that manifests and what exactly those complaints are depend upon the planets involved. But being out of touch with the 12th is typical. And this isn't because the planets inside it don't function, they do. It's that the native isn't aware of them. And now we're at the second major theme of the last house of the zodiac. This house represents the deep unconscious. When Freud proposed an unconscious mind, he was laughed at. Really, Sigmund? You really think there's a part of my mind that I don't know about? No way. Freud said, not only don't you know, it's like an iceberg. 90% of it is underwater. Therefore, it's possible to know almost nothing about what motivates you. The modern ruler of the 12th house is Neptune. It's a planet associated with both psychology and psychiatry, the mind, and the healthy functioning of the brain. This is the symbol for Neptune. It's the magic wand of the god of the sea. And this is the symbol for the psychological association. There's no accident here. It says the mind is oceanic. The psyche contains currents of consciousness, channels of energy, brain waves, and wavelengths. And there's a womb-like abyss in which a complete and whole you can be brought into being. In a womb, the fetus doesn't worry about becoming a baby or think about what it hasn't yet achieved. Just being there in the darkness with a blueprint inside is how it becomes complete. You can think of the 12th house as a similar space that contains creative magic and the hand of fate. It deals with some mysterious terrain and unseen, even unknown influences. So, not surprisingly, it's the house of hidden enemies. That is, any danger you're blind to. But even more to the point of the 12th house, the hidden enemy can be the self, otherwise known as self-sabotage and self-undoing. It's the self-defeating beliefs and behaviors that are unknown to the little bump of the conscious mind that's sticking up out of the water. We quite often have a hand in our own bad luck. We just can't see it. The 12th is also said to be the house of accidents and health issues. These two things are related. We can look to the opposite house for a little more information about this. Remember, the 6th is the house of health maintenance, the body-mind connection, and the presence of mind that makes living a sacred act. Conversely, the 12th is the absence of mind and the lack of care and the lack of discipline that can result in health conditions. It's important to note that planets in the 6-12 axis tend to convert stress into both illness and accidents. This is an unconscious process, sometimes deeply so, but people with planets in this axis tend to collapse physically. Mars and Neptune in these houses will turn anger into inflammation and emotional pain into chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Moon in the 12th is associated with anxiety, depression, and panic, or an unpreparedness for daily life. The phantom-like diseases that haunt the nervous system tend to be related to 12th house planets. When these placements feel like they're not being heard, this is how they often express themselves. We can look at accidents in the same way because accidents are rarely accidental. Many come down to a lack of preparation, carelessness, and a lack of wanting to ask for assistance when you actually need assistance. Most accidents can be avoided by being present rather than escaping the world around you, and by paying attention to your intuition. Intuition is the cord that joins the conscious and the unconscious. A crystal clear line of intuition not only prevents the mistakes that cause accidents, but it helps keep us well. It allows us to sense our limits before we cross them. Why is the 12th so foggy and convoluted anyway? Let's look at the physical world for the answer. The 12th house is just above the horizon, where a clear view of the sky and the stars is impossible due to the sun's light as it's rising. A misty horizon obscuring the constellations and the planets was linked to that part of the chart, and it remains the personality of the 12th. This is why anything in the 12th is difficult to make out, and why planets transiting the 12th seem to do their work behind a misty veil. This lack of clarity is also why the remedy for 12th house matters is so different from the remedy for 6th house matters. In the 6th, the natural house of Virgo, we analyze, manage, and control. In the 12th, you release, surrender, and forgive. But that can be difficult because the 12th is a place about which the native, at least in the beginning, knows very little. In other words, the 12th house is what we don't know about ourselves that stops us from fulfilling the birth chart. Planets in the 12th are always neglected. That usually starts in childhood through the parents. And then they continue to be stumbling blocks to the fulfillment of the sun. We have to make all of our planets conscious before we can actualize the sun. And yet, the importance of factors in the last house of the wheel is almost always undervalued. This is a shame because 12th house inhabitants are also cornerstones of our success. Why? Because this is the house of service, and planets within it are the ones around which we're likely to make sacrifices. We're often successful regarding what we're glad to make sacrifices for. So in vocational readings geared toward career choices or life's calling, the 12th house always needs to be examined. Through 12th house planets, we touch something deep within ourselves. The 12th is also considered a karmic house that has a role in the continuum of lifetimes. In medieval astrology, it was called the house of sorrows and burdens. When problems persist, it's natural to jump the bounds of time and start exploring past lives and perhaps future lives for an answer. So, karmic astrologers put a great deal of emphasis on this house. They consider it a ledger that shows the debts you brought in from the people you've been before. Receive a karmic boost by smashing the like button and subscribing. And thank you for watching Secrets from an Astrologer's Desk. Now that we've finished with the houses, we have a basis to understand the qualities of the signs. So that's coming up next.